Okay, welcome back for episode number 2 of the Press Coverage Podcast. This is our Thursday video, and today we're going to start off with talking about some OBJ rumors that we've been hearing. Apparently, he might be getting sent off to Minnesota.
Yeah,
the
I heard
conversation I
earlier.
heard was a second and a fifth round pick, possibly.
Not even a first.
Not even a first, which is
Yeah,
crazy
that would-
compared to the Cleveland trade.
That would be an unbelievable win for the Vikings if they got Stephon Diggs' first-round pick for that, and then they can get Odell to replace him, which is a better upgrade for just a second and a fifth.
I don't
Then
really,
they'd be totally set, and they have 2 first-round picks going into this draft. Like, they're loaded right now.
I don't really think that the Browns would give him up for a second and a fifth, considering that the Vikings have 2 first-round picks.
Yeah, I agree. I think if the trade goes down, it'll end up being one of those 2 firsts.
Even still, I think that's a huge move.
I feel like there's no way. I mean, it would be good to replace Diggs and not have Tajay Sharpie or wide receiver 2 or a rookie. So
It'll be interesting to see if the Browns pull the trigger on this, which I don't think they will. But if they do, it'll be interesting to see what they do with that number 10 overall pick now. So I think there's a good chance they would end up going receiver in that case.
yeah, maybe take Judy when they're not gone. Also, the Browns. Talking about the Browns, they just got new uniforms today. They released. They pretty much look like the old ones. I thought.
Yeah, they're really ugly. They look like the old-fashioned uniforms.
I really don't think they're that different.
Yeah,
Like, I don't know why they made the change because it's like irrelevant, but I don't think they're like disgusting.
pretty much just got rid of the orange ones.
Yeah.
Well, the orange ones are bad, but like,
Why do you think these are so much worse than what they had before?
it's just they're boring. Like, they're only like a little circle in the sleeve. Like, they're
Yeah.
ugly, and they're.
I agree that it's not an
color.
upgrade, but it's not a downgrade either.
Just a
Yeah, I
classic.
guess not.
Just very Browns.
Yeah.
If it's anything, though, it's a downgrade than an upgrade, I would say.
I don't know why, but okay, whatever.
All right, so we wanted to talk about the Jets and the Dolphins, of course, and then we would talk about the 4 teams without first-round picks
Yeah,
going into this draft.
today marks 10 days until the draft, so we're going to get into some teams that don't have first-round picks because that's not really going to affect our next episode where we're going to break down the draft and do a mock draft. So one team that doesn't have any first-round picks is the Bills, considering that they traded for Stephon Diggs. I mean, what's their first pick then? They have a second-round pick, right?
I think they have a second, yeah.
Yeah, more than likely. I think getting Diggs instead of using their first-round pick, they weren't going to get one of those top 3 receivers. They could have got a good receiver, but I think Diggs is a much better option than what was going to be left. And yeah, they're going to have to pay him, but they have money right now, and he's going to make an immediate splash in their offense that can be a potential playoff team again next
I
year.
would say a first-round pick for Diggs is pretty steep, but they're in the perfect window where their roster's built and they're basically a piece or 2 away from being a real contender. Like, if you believe in Josh Allen, which I don't, but if you do, all he really needed was one more weapon to get the job done. So on paper, the Bills could be a contender if Josh Allen's good enough.
Their first pick
Well, he's
is
going into year 3.
2.
Josh Allen.
Josh Allen, yeah.
You said Diggs, and I was like,
Yeah.
Bills' first pick in the draft is in the second round, 54 overall. I don't really know what they plan on targeting in this mock draft. I'm looking at it has them taking Donovan Peoples-Jones from Michigan, the wide receiver. But now that they have,
I don't think they really need another receiver.
Yeah,
see that happening.
I can see them adding some D-line depth, maybe. I don't know. It seems they have a pretty built roster.
yeah. Their draft is going to be mostly depth picks for the old guys that are going to head out soon. There's a bunch of old guys on that defense that are all really good, so they're probably going to fill in the gaps there when they retire.
Get ready for.
So like, it all works out. Like they don't need a big impact first round pick. They needed a big impact Stephon Diggs.
It was definitely a good move for the position they were in.
I mean, Diggs definitely makes them a better team, but this year they're going to have a really tough schedule coming up.
All they have to do is
Yeah.
win our division now, which everyone in the division has the same tough schedule. So they could easily win the division 9-7, 10-6, I feel like.
That's very true. And really, it's just down to us. Whatever the Patriots have, us as in the Jets and the Bills, and if the Dolphins can pull together a team. But I don't think they'll be able to do it this first coming year. But I don't know, Pete. What do you think about the Dolphins?
the Dolphins made some moves in the offseason or in this free agency, and Brian Flores is obviously a great coach pulling up. So we're gonna get into them a little bit later, but the Bills still, I mean, they replaced a young guy in Shaq Lawson with Mario Addison, who's older, and they also added cornerback fit in Davius White, Josh Norman, an older guy in the secondary. So we'll see what they have. I think that they're easily the favorite to start right now, but you never know what the Patriots are going to get. And the Dolphins are both up. So I agree with what you guys said there. Another team that does not have a first round pick would be Houston Texans because they traded it to the Dolphins for Laramie Tunsil. What do you guys think?
Yeah, the Houston Texans have made a lot of questionable draft moves for the future, but for the present, I guess it makes a little more sense because they're getting these impact players that are going to come in right away and do like obviously Laramie Tunsil is really good protecting Deshaun.
Yeah, not only do they not have a first round pick, they don't have much of any picks the next few years, to be honest. Their roster's built now, though. They could be a contender. They're not like one of the best rosters, but you got Deshaun Watson. You've got a pretty good receiving core. You still got J.J. Watt, so they can make something happen.
I mean,
Yeah, but they did lose a lot of defense, right?
yeah, I don't think that you can look at that team and say that they got any better.
I agree there.
Yeah, they lost
they were
their
already
best
good.
player in a terrible trade.
They gave away their draft capital and their best offensive player, and also lost people like DJ Reader, Shaquille Addy, and
Marquise Mingo.
Yeah, him too.
Was he a starter? I just saw him on the report when I was looking at it.
I think he was more of a rotational guy, but still lost.
So yeah, they lost their best player in D Hop. Don't have a first, don't have a second. So I don't.
For the next 2 years.
Watch out for Randall Cobb, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that receiving core really isn't that bad. Randall Cobb is honestly.
No, they've got depth too. Randall Cobb's probably their number 4 guy. Maybe
yeah, there's rumors, I think, that Kenny Stills and Kiki Cutie might still get traded. So Bill O'Brien's not quite done with his terrible trades of the offseason.
Well, I mean, it makes sense to get rid of one, right? Because there's one guy that's going to be an odd man out. But I don't know why he set up his receiving core this way. He was just fine keeping it exactly how it was.
Yeah. I was excited for Kenny Stills before all this stuff happened.
The Texans actually do have a second-round pick that they got from Arizona for the Dolphins. They picked 40th overall. So
I thought
that's
they
not the
gave
pick
that
they traded away for Cooks.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot.
I'm pretty sure they gave 2 firsts and a second for Tunsil, and then they gave the second.
Yeah, we should
for
confirm
Cooks.
this. They gave away a second for Cooks. I'm not sure if it was that pick or not.
I mean, I don't know if they had another one. Let's see.
Okay, well, you're checking that out. They lost a lot of defense, but what are they going to do in this? Well, I guess nothing in this draft.
I mean,
there's so many holes. Like,
they've got a bunch of holes and not very many picks to fill them.
Like
their O-line's still not in a good position. Sure, they have a great left tackle in Laramie Tunsil, but you got to fill out that O-line to really protect Deshaun. That D-line, you lost Clowney. It's just a lot. Their secondary is not very good.
If they move Kenny Stills, who do you think would want him? Or Kiki Cutie, if anybody?
Well, Cutie's more of a slot guy, and then Stills is your deep threat.
Do you think anyone would even want one of these guys?
Yeah, for later round selection, sure. I don't think people are going to be freaking out about them being available or anything, but they're starters.
New England need starters, but you never know.
Could see it.
The Texans.
You think Deshaun Watson's going to get traded?
Texans did keep that pick. They actually gave the Rams a 2022 4th-round pick for Cooks.
I think they got that pick back. They gave it a 22 4th-rounder and a 2nd-round pick.
Nah, it was the Rams got number 57.
Okay, so it was a different 2nd-round pick. It was probably the Texans' original one.
So the Texans have a 2nd-round pick in this draft?
Yeah, which a pretty early one too. It's the Cardinals.
40th.
That's pretty good then.
Yeah.
Unless he gets traded, but we'll see how that goes.
We'll see what they'll be able to do with that.
There's still about a week before the draft.
We got 10 days. So another team with no first round pick would be the Indianapolis Colts. They signed Phillip Rivers, Xavier Rhodes, re-signed Costanzo, but they traded their first round pick, which was a pretty early one at number 13, I believe, for DeForest Buckner.
The Colts always won very interesting moves like this. Like no one would expect it, and it doesn't seem like a great trade on paper, but Buckner's a great player. And sure, you have to pay him too. And it's not like he's on a rookie contract now, but he's a great player, and you give him the 13th pick, which is never a guarantee, so you can't really be too mad at the move.
Yeah, they don't really need offensive line, and I feel like that would be there, or a wide receiver necessarily. They're not looking for one of those guys. So I think snagging one of the best interior linemen on defense would be it's worth
I think
their
they
first
could have
round
won
pick.
receiver if they kept that pick.
Yeah, but it's not their primary need.
Yeah.
And like they have a hole there, and that really fills up that hole. He's a really good player, just coming right out. And there's not really a guy like that at 13 in the draft, so I think it's a move.
They drafted Paris Campbell last year too. He's a young guy. He got hurt, so they probably didn't want to take a receiver there. Also, if you look at that trade, it's great for the 49ers who came off a Super Bowl appearance and now have 2 first-round picks.
Yeah, and they're in the prime spot to take a receiver.
The 49ers could afford that loss with their D-line for sure. They've got the depth they need. They could really use a receiver. I could see Jerry Jeudy fitting that system very well if he falls to 13.
Jeudy and Deebo Samuel would be really good wide receiver core.
Kyle Shanahan would have a field day with them for sure.
Yep.
To go along with Kittle and those running backs in any sort of situation, they're going to be a really tough offense.
For sure.
And they have a second first-round pick later on.
31.
I could see them maybe taking a corner at some point relatively early if they can. I can also see them trading the 31st pick to get some more middle-round selections because I don't think they have a second or a third. Or I know they're lacking a lot of depth in the draft, so I can see them trading down there.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, they also don't have a lot of holes. Maybe they're thinking they fill 2 quick holes, wide receiver and corner, right away, and then they work on other little stuff later on. You never know. I like where the 49ers are at. They have a lot of leverage. But back to the Colts with Phillip Rivers. How do we think they're going to fare in the pretty weak AFC South?
I think the Colts could make something happen there. The Titans are a team to watch out for still. The end of last year, they were on fire going into the playoffs. But the Colts, like watching them, you could tell they were good on the O-line. They could run the football, and they're really just lacking a quarterback on offense. Sure, Phillip Rivers is getting up there in age, but if he's got anything left in the tank, that offense could really roll.
Yeah. And
the defense is pretty solid as well.
Honestly, everybody says AFC South, but I mean, the AFC South is like this every year. Normally, there's like 1 or 2 teams that are like average to above average, and then 2 of them wind up making the playoffs. But the Colts, I mean, their defense is young. They like to ball hawk. I mean, Darius Leonard is a stud. And then on offense, they've got that bulking up with Quentin Nelson, and signing Anthony Costanzo was definitely a plus. If you look on the back end on defense, I don't know if Xavier Rhodes is going to be an instant difference maker because he had an off year, but you never know with guys like that, like coming off of a bad year. Like they used to be stars. Why can't they go back to that? Yeah.
Well, also for that, they lost Pierre Desir and they replaced him with Xavier Rhodes, so he doesn't have like these huge shoes to fill. He only has to fill like whatever Pierre Desir was able to do, and then if he can add more, then that's already a worthwhile signing.
I would say he's a downgrade over Desir in my opinion. He's up there in age. Usually when cornerbacks lose a step, there's no going back, but you never know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. But if he's able to come back, I mean, he was in the Pro Bowl, even though he had a terrible year. Somehow he still made it. Maybe he's worth something.
I don't know. Another team that we've been looking at that doesn't have a first-round pick would be the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, we talked a little about the Steelers the other episode, but the Steelers are primed and set to be a really high record. Like they're definitely going to be playoff bound. I would say, unless like barring any significant injuries. They have a really good defense. They have an up-and-coming offense with young specialists, like the running backs and wide receivers are all pretty young. And Ben Roethlisberger is coming back from injury. And if he gets hurt again, I really think Cam Newton should be looked at by the Steelers. I think that's a good fit. But they're going to be they're going to be steamrolling a lot of easy teams with their easy schedule. So I think they're
I
going to
saw
have a pretty good record.
rumors about Jameis possibly landing there. I don't think he wants to as long as Big Ben's a starter, but I mean, if Jameis stepped in, that offense is going to lose too much. And again, the defense, the second Minkah Fitzpatrick walked into that locker room, that defense was pretty unstoppable. Like, they're not really weak anyway. They got Devin Bush at middle linebacker in the first round last year. He was pretty solid. And then they still got a pretty good offensive line. You got Big Ben, and then you got Juju, Deontay Johnson.
Well, I have a question then.
Pretty
Do you
stacked
think
roster.
if Ben Roethlisberger were to get hurt again and they wanted to sign one of those free agent quarterbacks, who would be the best fit there? Cam Newton, Jameis Winston, or even Andy Dalton?
I think people are sleeping on Andy Dalton as well, to be honest.
Andy Dalton,
I think whenever Andy Dalton has had a good offense around him, he gets the job done.
he had
I
an
can see
amazing
Dalton or
video.
Winston fitting in there well.
You guys
Did you see his video where he was throwing right into
He
the
was throwing
net?
dots.
He threw dimes over and over, like perfect.
Like
and it was
usually those
live.
workout videos aren't all that impressive, but that one I was like, okay, he can throw the ball for sure.
He's always been good enough to win games, and it wasn't his fault that they were losing. So I could really see him like being Tannehill of the next year, like going somewhere, stepping in, being amazing.
Asset for Andy Dalton rather than trying to sign Jameis or Cam.
That's the thing. I think I'd rather sign Jameis without having to give up draft capital. But who knows what you really have to give up to get Andy Dalton? It might be something like a 5th round pick.
Well, Andy Dalton might get released. They don't have a need for him, and they're paying him a lot of money.
I don't really see that happening, though. I think that they want a guy for Joe to learn from, or whoever they wind up drafting, most likely Joe Burrow. But I think they want – I mean, having an experienced veteran in the locker room is something that is really unmatched. It teaches the rookies how to be a pro, how to break down film, and, like, what they need to do to be a good player in the NFL. Even if they weren't a great player themselves, they know what they have to do. So I don't see them releasing Andy Dalton.
Okay. Yeah, I think he's a good veteran presence for Joe Burrow for sure.
Just Cincinnati's a little crazy. They do like weird things. They benched Andy Dalton on his birthday last year, like for no reason. He was doing fine. It's just the team was a mess. So I don't know. Like they're a weird franchise.
And then they brought him
back,
and they won a game right when they brought Andy Dalton back. So
it's because he's great. He's a great player.
I'm
really excited for him. And I'm really excited for Cam. I think Cam can come back and be a full-time starter after he takes over for somebody. And I think Pittsburgh would be a really good fit, but maybe that's just me.
That could definitely work out for sure.
I think Mike Tomlin would be really good for someone like Cam because Mike Tomlin's good with big personalities.
It didn't seem like it at the time that he was good with personalities, but then you see what happens with AB the second he leaves that locker room.
Yeah,
he managed him quite well.
All that AB stuff was under wraps for years. No one knew how crazy he was. And then he leaves Pittsburgh for 5 minutes and goes on Twitter rampages and is a mess and freezes his feet.
Tomlin's a different breed. He can get along. Yeah.
But then again, I could say the opposite holds true for Le'Veon Bell because as he walked to the Jets, people were saying that he was a firestorm. And that he could cause chaos, and all he's been really is a good leader.
Yeah, maybe Pittsburgh's just the environment
problems.
there. They have a lot of stars.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not anymore, really. They kind of calmed down. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger is still a little bit of a diva, but
most of their studs on the defensive side now, and they don't have any crazy egos or anything.
Yeah, Juju's like a fun personality, but he's not like a crazy ego.
Yeah.
Imagine that defense if Ryan Shazier never went down.
Yeah, well, they still have good linebackers now, but Shazier was really good.
Yeah. I mean, he was just an older guy. He was a difference maker there. All right, now I think we're going to start moving into the Jets. We're going to give a very in-depth analysis of their free agency so far and what they might look to go forward in the draft. So I'll let you guys start it off.
I would definitely say the marquee signing was Connor McGovern, right on the offensive line. We've needed a center ever since Nick Mangold retired, and we got a pretty, I'd say, above average one. 3-year, $27 million deal, nothing too expensive. And this is the first real upgrade on the offensive line we've had in a while, so there's something.
Yeah, we've really been looking for a center for like 2 years, and I feel like we've never actually had a full-on replacement.
Yeah, we've been playing backups at center.
We had Matt Khalil last year, and he just wasn't anything. Like, he was just too old. And I don't
And
know.
before him, we had Jonathan Harrison, who's still on the roster, but he should never really be starting.
Yeah, we finally filled that quick hole. We signed 4 offensive linemen, not right? So we have a complete renovation almost.
This
Yeah.
is McGovern's 4th year in the league, I think, right?
It's his 4th or 5th.
So he's still a young guy. Signed a
Yeah,
lot.
he's young. He's got upside.
That's definitely signed a lot of
He
unproven.
ranked at
actually really
PFF's,
upside
I
with
think,
him.
13th or 11th center, somewhere like that. So slightly above average, and he has room for improvement.
Basically exactly what we've been needing for so long. How come he was so cheap if he was a top almost 15-ish center?
He's a young.
Greg Glasgow was a better interior guy on the market, so he was the second best. Centers never go for much more than 11 mil, so.
Well, it's nice to get a good one finally. Hopefully we can save Sam Darnold.
And more of a boomer bust prospect we signed is George Fant. He's a tackle. He was a swing tackler for the Seahawks. He wasn't even really their starter, and we gave him quite a big contract. It's technically 3 years, 27 mil, but it's essentially just a 1 year, $9 million contract, and then we could get out of it after that. I think Joe Douglas is looking for a guy who's athletic here, and in case the draft doesn't fall the way he wants to, he has a guy he can plug and play alongside Chuma Doga. It wouldn't be ideal, but at least he's got something in case the draft doesn't go the way he wants
didn't
it
he
to.
play a tight end a little bit though in Seattle?
He started off as a left tackle and then played some tight end. They were trying to find a home for him and never found it because they always loved his athleticism and they couldn't find the best way to use it there.
Again, that seems like a lot of unproven guys on that line. Hopefully, it will work out. See how it goes.
Mm-hmm. And then we re-signed Alex Lewis as well, and then hopefully he'll start at left guard. And then we signed right guard Greg Van Roten from the Carolina Panthers. He's bounced around the league for a while. He played in the CFL even, but last 2 years in Carolina, he really proved himself as an NFL starter. And we got him on a very cheap contract. It's a 3 years, $10.5 million. So it's about $3 to $4 million a year, nothing crazy. Yeah. So if he can be a starter on that contract, it's a pretty solid signing.
And it feels like the first time the Jets are actually implementing pretty good structured contracts, especially with these linemen. All of them are pretty easy to get out of. You get a 1 year guaranteed deal, and then if it doesn't pan out, you can buy them out of the contract or something similar.
Yeah, Douglas definitely is showing a lot more discipline in his signings than Mike McCagnon, our old GM, who would often dish out too much money for players he really wanted. So it's good to see that we're being fiscally responsible for the first time in a while.
Alex had some trouble staying healthy last year, right?
Yeah. There's no guarantee Alex Lewis will be a starter either. We still got Brian Winters. So the 3 of them will probably be competing for 2 jobs.
Brian Winters was always pretty good. I don't know
why he's an average guard, I would say. Nothing special, but he could win a job. And then a corner we brought in on a pretty cheap deal. It was a surprise cut by the Colts, Pierre Desir. We brought in for 1 year, $5.5 million. Pretty cheap contract. In 2018, notably, he played very well in 2018, and he earned himself a 3-year extension with the Colts. But in 2019, he was playing through a hamstring injury, and his play declined a lot. And the Colts surprisingly cut him. So if he goes back to his healthy form, he could be a very cheap signing and a plus starter at corner for us.
That was kind of out of the blue. I thought he was an up-and-coming younger corner that was coming into his own in Indianapolis, and he looked promising. And then out of nowhere, they got axed, and I don't know, we got lucky. I think we picked up a pretty good asset to go with Brian Poole, who we also re-signed.
Oh, yeah, going into Brian Poole. I think that was a steal for $5 million. He was a top 3 slot corner last year, statistically, and I thought we'd have to pay him a lot more to keep him.
I'm really happy with a lot of our lower-end moves in this offseason.
I know that the Jets last year, towards the end of the year, had some really nobody heard of corners that played unbelievable, right?
Yeah, alongside Bless Austin and Arthur Millette, out of nowhere, these 3 guys formed a trio that actually worked. Who knows if they can sustain it?
The Instagram stuff about them was so cool. It was how they were just locking down everybody.
This was after it was Tremaine Johnson and Andre Roberts, or what was his name? Darryl Roberts.
Darryl
Roberts. Good. They were both trash. They should not be starting in the NFL. And then we got these young guys come out of nowhere.
So those are the guys that they're going to be running with next year, most likely.
And then,
they're going to be our starters going forward. I hope so.
Well, it's Pierre Desir is going to compete with Arthur Millette and Bless Austin for 2 spots.
What if
So
they
we'll
just
see.
become the premier lockdown duo of the NFL? They
They
both
could.
just like go off completely. They're better than the Dolphins signed corners.
Yeah, well, we're about to get into the Dolphins, but real quick, another player we brought back on a cheap deal, Jordan Jenkins, outside linebacker. And all offseason, the chatter has been there's no chance he'd be signing with the Jets. He thought our offer was laughably low, and he ends up coming back for 1 year, $5 million, which is
He
very cheap
couldn't
for what
find a
he
better
is.
offer. That's all it was.
Well,
Like,
he did find a better offer, but the reports were that he wanted to play with Greg Williams another year before he tries to cash in. And he's gotten better every year. His sack totals have went up. He got 8.5 sacks last year. Could end up being a 10 sack type of guy.
that might be a really smart move for him financially. I think he's only improving every year. Well, you just said that, but like clearly, his cash is gonna fly up on the market when the market gets tougher for pass rushers,
Did he
especially if he does well.
lead you guys in sacks last year, or did Henry Anderson have it?
I think he led us in sacks.
Henry Anderson's more of an interior lineman though, so if he was leading
Jamal
us in
Adams was
sacks,
actually the competition. I think Jamal Adams had 7 sacks last year.
he's a monster.
Yeah. And then one last move the Jets made, which me and Lev disagree on quite a bit, is we let Robbie Anderson walk and brought in a cheaper Brashad Perryman on $6.5 million
All right.
for the year. So what do you think about that?
I think Rashad Perryman is an absolute bomb, and he does not deserve our roster spot. I think we could have done so much better. We could just trade for Kiki Cutie right now. There's our slot receiver. I don't think well, actually, Jameson Crowder's our slot receiver.
Crowder's our
So
slot
never
guy.
mind. But
Perryman
we
will
could trade
play
for Kenny
outside.
Stills, and we have a much better deep threat than
That actually would have been a decent move.
Brashad Droppyman, the terrible first-round pick for the Ravens, who was okay on the Browns and then finally did something in Tampa. But we don't have a famous Jameis throwing 60-yard bombs every play, so he's not going to work out for us. I'm not a fan.
See, I like Perriman's speed. I know Adam Gase has been looking for a quick guy. The last 5 games of last year, I know you can't take away from his early career, but he had a lot of injuries and stuff you have to factor in. But the last 5 games, he was on pace for 80 receptions, 1,600 yards, and 16 touchdowns. So if he can keep even a fraction of that pace, he'll be worth it as our number 3 receiver.
The only reason he was on a pace like that was because Chris Godwin and Mike Evans were both hurt in the crazy Tampa Bay Jameis Winston offense. He's not going to be able to do that with Sam Darnold or Adam Gase.
I'm sure, but we don't have a Chris Godwin or Mike Evans, right? So if we're featuring this guy, who knows what he really has? And it's a low risk signing. If he's bad, he could end up getting benched even. Who knows what we might take 2 receivers in the draft and end up benching. But it's worth seeing for the upside on a cheap contract, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I guess so.
I think that, I mean, he's your Robbie Anderson replacement. Robbie Anderson was a better player on the field, but this is definitely a more contract-friendly signing.
Yeah, and Robbie Anderson was a much worse player off the field. He had a lot of issues that the Jets.
I think that's why
really
Douglas was hesitant to pay him, because it's not like he cashed in on a major contract, right? It was 2 years, $20 million.
So I don't think it's the wrong idea to let Robbie Anderson walk. I just think it was the wrong idea to bring in Brashad.
Again,
Perryman
I don't think Douglas sees
they could have had someone else.
He's going to be our long-term starter. I think he's filling a roster spot.
Was DeMarcus Robinson on the market?
He was.
I would have liked him. Okay.
I'll take Brashad Perryman over DeMarcus Robinson.
Whatever.
Oh, God. All right. Now I'm going to start moving in depth to personally what I think was the best offseason, not just a Dolphins fan.
Of course you think that.
Also because we signed the most people and had the most cap going into free agency, and now in the later stages of free agency still have the second most right behind the Browns. And we'll get started here with the signing, the highest paid cornerback in the NFL, Byron Jones. He's only 27 years old and signs a 5-year, $82 million deal with $40 million guaranteed. And honestly, people look at a big number at $82 million and don't really realize how the Dolphins structured this contract. In year 1, he makes $11 million. Year 2, 14. Year 3, 14.3. And then in his 4th year, or after his 3rd year, they can buy him out, and that only leaves them with $6 million in dead cap. So you have him right now at 27 years old, and if he starts to decline by age 30, you can always cut him and only have $6 million in dead cap, which isn't nothing, but for a guy that you would be paying millions and millions of dollars for in the long run, I think it's a pretty good signing the way that they structured this deal. On the field, obviously, his interceptions, he's only had 3 in his career and has gone like 40 games without having an interception. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he was the best man-on-man defender last year statistically, and he's one of the best at covering tight windows.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a huge impact for the Miami defense, especially with Brian Flores taking over as head coach. He's going to fit in that system really well. Him and Xavier Rhodes on opposite sides will definitely be a duo that teams will regret to face. But I'm not sure. I like the 3-year, and then you can drop. $6 million dead cap isn't that bad. So yeah, I guess you're right. It's a really good signing, I think, for them. The structure. If they didn't structure it that way, it might not have been as good since he's 27. 5 years for a corner is a long time. He's going to be out of his prime probably right after he turns 30. So, but the way they structured it, like, it works out perfectly.
And if you
I don't love the contract. I think the Dolphins can pull it off because they have the cap space. I don't think the corner was a big need for them. I think they splurged an area they didn't need to. And I also don't think the money stated accounts for the signing bonus, which will add a little bit of more guaranteed money. But at the same time, the contract's not terrible, and the Dolphins can afford it with their salary cap.
Well, I like with Miami's idea of, I have one elite corner, let me take a second elite corner and put it on the other side. Now it's going to be a lot harder than dealing with just one half of the field having an elite corner. Like, instead of maybe bulking up something like defensive line or offensive line, they're doubling down in another area, making it significantly harder for teams to throw.
See, this has always been,
I like that philosophy.
This has been the Jets' philosophy, and it never works for us, right? So we have Avery Williamson at middle linebacker. Let's sign C.J. Mosley to the biggest linebacker deal of all time.
He got hurt. They both got hurt.
Okay. Yeah, they both got hurt. We have Jamal Adams. Let's use our second-round pick on Marcus May and just make our safety position great while the rest of our roster is bad. I don't think it's the right way to build a team, but I think, again, the Dolphins can pull it off with the amount of money they have, and since they have so many draft picks to fill their holes, it could work out for them.
Yeah. Well, it's not the way to build right from the ground, but it's a good starting point. There's only so many elite players that are just hitting the market, and you can consider Byron Jones as one of those players. So I think it's worth finding and paying an elite player if you want to bring him in.
Yeah, off of what Matt said, the Dolphins have, within the next 2 years, 5 first-rounders and 4 second-rounders. So, I mean, they're definitely going to attack more positions of need through the draft. All right, another big player that we signed, the second biggest contract, was Kyle Van Noy. 29 years old, signing a 4-year, $51 million contract. He's got $30 million guaranteed. And again, you'll see the way that the Dolphins structured every single one of their contracts. They have a buyout after either like between 1 and 3 years. I think Byron Jones is the only 3-year one. But Kyle Van Noy, he can get bought out after 2 years, and again, $6 million dead in cap, which is more, definitely considering he's not signed for as much, so the 6 is a bigger hit. But Kyle Van Noy on the field in Brian Flores' defense in New England was one of the best players out there. He was an animal. He was a leader on that team, and he played fantastic in the Super Bowl. So Van Noy is definitely a guy that I'm looking forward to be a mentor for our younger linebackers.
Yeah, he'll definitely be a good veteran presence on the field, and that was a position of need for the Dolphins. They have 2 really good middle linebackers, but that'll finally solidify their core, I think. And I think that was a worthwhile signing as well. But they did pay him a lot. He's pretty old. So I don't know, Matt, what do you think?
I think you definitely have to defer to Brian Flores on this one. If he thinks that Van Noy is a guy who's going to fit his system and fill whatever role he wants him to, then maybe the money's worth it. But I agree with his age and the contract. I'm a little skeptical.
He's definitely up there in age, but yeah, I agree with what you said with Flores bringing in his guys. Like the Dolphins signed 3 former Patriots this offseason, and it's guys that Flores knows, guys that he's coached before, so I'm really okay with it despite the money.
Just something to worry about is the Lions did that the past 2 years, and so far it has not worked out at all to their favor. And now it looks like the Dolphins might be following in the Lions' footsteps.
Brian Flores is a different coach than Matt Patricia.
I agree, but before when Detroit hired him, he was the defensive guru, Matt Patricia, and everyone thought he would be this great step in, and he's bringing in all these expatriates. I like Brian Flores, but is that a concern for you as a Dolphins fan?
Not at all, honestly. Just based off what Flores showed us last year. I'm pretty sure Flores already probably has more wins than Matt Patricia does in 1 year compared to 2. And
That's more Ryan Fitzpatrick than anything, I would say.
it's definitely the coaching. Definitely has something to do with that roster last year. Definitely pulling out 5 wins with that roster was definitely.
They were trying to tank from the office, so they were doing something right, I guess, or something right or something wrong.
To speak to this Patriot philosophy of building, like the reason the Lions failed by re-signing Patriots players is the Patriots system works because they're taking these average to slightly above average players and putting them on cheap contracts. But by overpaying these types of players, you're not going to be able to build a winner the way the Patriots did. So I'm a little worried about the Dolphins arguably overpaying these players. But again, if Brian Flores can make them fit his system well, maybe the money's worth it.
They also have a lot of money to spend and a lot of draft capital, so they're not going to be spending a ton of money every year. They're going to be building year after year with all these first-round picks. So I'm not too worried about splurging a little too much.
And again, if Van Noy doesn't pan out, 2 years when they can cut him with $6 million dead. So next guy we're going to move on to is Jordan Howard, 25 years old, signs a 2-year, $10 million contract, pretty straight up. He's guaranteed after year 1. So year 1, the contract is 2 years, $10 million. In year 1, they pay him $1 million or $1.75 million. So essentially, it's a 1-year deal worth $1.75 million, and then he can make the rest of it in his second year if he pans out. So they can cut him after year 1 and lose no money. Like there's nothing that comes with the cut. Jordan Howard, a surprising statistic that I found is in his 3 years in the league, he's 3rd in rushing and 3rd in rushing touchdowns in that time span. So, I mean, he's a guy who's been slept on. He's one of 5 guys who has scored 6 touchdowns in the past 3 seasons at least. And I like the idea of bringing him in because he's still only 25 years old. So he can pan out to be a guy who will be a good running back. But they're also bringing him in to groom the guy that they plan on drafting in this upcoming draft.
Yeah, I think that's a really good structure of the contract. I mean, 9 years for a guy like Jordan Howard, or $9 million, sorry, for a guy like Jordan Howard in the second year is pretty terrible if that's what it breaks out to be. But yeah, he was almost considered an elite runner in Chicago for a year, which is kind of crazy to think about now after all the places he's been. But he could be a good mentor. I think he could be a good starter if they choose to go that route. So yeah, I think that's a good fit. I think it's a good signing, but I don't know. I mean, going forward, like Jordan Howard on the Dolphins isn't going to be like this huge splash, but like I like it. I like the little move.
Yeah, I didn't realize the contract was structured that way either. I could definitely see them keeping him for 1 year and also drafting a guy and then moving on after this offseason. I looked and it says it's $4 million guaranteed overall, and it's the $1 million this year, so they would only lose a couple million by cutting him. So definitely a good contract, and he could be a good mentor and play meaningful snaps this season.
It's kind of like what I said with Andy Dalton, but at the running back position, which you don't see as often. But it's kind of like what Frank Gore did for Devin Singletary last year. Have Jordan Howard pave the way for a young guy, J.K. Dobbins, maybe Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift. That's what they're looking for in the draft, I think. So yeah.
You think you use the 26th pick on a running back?
Personally, I don't want them to, unless they have like a strong feeling that Jonathan Taylor won't be there at 39. But since you pick so early in the second round, maybe you want to focus on a position like edge or safety that might not be there later in the draft. Meanwhile, there's like 5 or 6 running backs that I can see fitting our system.
They would have to really want one of the guys to take him in the first round when they could easily get someone falling to 39 easily.
Well, I think a lot of these guys in the early rounds, the running backs are going to be really good. Those 3 you named are going to be pretty like top tier guys as soon as they hop in the league.
And one of the 3 will be there for sure, though.
So a guy who the 3 of us are all very familiar with from his time with the Giants is Eric Flowers. He signs a 3-year, $30 million contract with $19.95 guaranteed. They can buy him out after 2 years and leave $3 million dead. He's only 26 years old. He's famous for being a first-round pick for the Giants and not being able to protect Eli Manning at all at left tackle. He was supposed to be his blind spot. He was supposed to protect him, but that did not work. Last year, he moves over to the Washington Redskins. They move him to guard, and he had a much, much better time at guard than he did at tackle. Dolphins plan on using him at guard again this year, so hopefully that pans out.
Yeah, you hope he's not your best lineman, but if moving forward, like he's a pretty good guard. A lot of scouts are saying like he couldn't be a tackle, but as soon as they brought him in and he started playing guard, he improved immensely. He was good on the interior. So I mean, he's fine. I don't love $30 million for him, but I know that linemen are expensive and linemen are important. So I see what they're doing. And okay, sure. Eric Flowers.
I personally think this contract is awful, right? You're giving him $18 million guaranteed to play guard too, not tackle anymore. He was awful at tackle. Guard, he played pretty good with the Redskins last year, but he's not worth that kind of guaranteed money. And you're keeping him for at least 2 of these seasons with this contract. And it's just a big question mark, and he shouldn't be doing that much guaranteed money with what he's proven himself to be.
That price tag definitely high, but we definitely needed to upgrade our line. We added him and Ted Karras, who will hopefully help impact and have. We're gonna draft someone hopefully early, but
Yeah, and he was a first-round pick for a reason. So you never know.
He has potential, and I think we started to see a little bit of that last year in Washington.
Could say the same thing with Brashad Perryman. First-round pick for a reason.
Brashad Perryman has had so many years in the league to suck. How many years has Eric Flowers been? 3 or 2?
Probably more. Probably.
I think it's been 4 now.
4 or 5.
Oh, okay. If they're in the same draft class,
I think they might have been the same draft class.
I'm looking that up right now. You guys keep going.
Yeah. Eric Flowers hopefully pans out. It is a lot of guaranteed money. I definitely agree there, but we had to beef up the line. It was the only thing that we could do. I wish we could have signed a guy like Connor McGovern or what's his name? Blasco.
Okay, they were both in the 2015 draft class. Eric Flowers was pick 9, and Brashad Perryman was pick 26.
All right.
And Perryman's contract is pretty cheap, Leb.
All right. Let's move on.
All right. The last big contract that I'm going to get into is Shaq Lawson. He signed he's 26 years old, signed a 3-year, $30 million, pretty similar to Eric Flowers. He also has $20 million guaranteed, and he has a buyout after 2 years, but his dead cap is a lot less. It's only 1.3. Shaq Lawson's a young guy. He's 26. He had some impact on that Bills defense. He had, I believe, 6.5 sacks last year, and he's only improved in his first 3 years in the league. So I could see him being an impact player. We definitely needed some help rushing the quarterback, and he's also a very underrated run stopper. So I'm looking forward to seeing Shaq Lawson in Miami.
Yeah, he's a big dude. He fills a big hole there, the defensive line. I mean, the whole team is just getting a complete makeover. I think he's a good anchor on the interior for the defense to start with. He's not a great player by any means, but he's a good, solid player. So we'll see where he goes. He's young enough that they can have him around for the rest of this rebuild, and he'll be solid.
Again, I don't love the guaranteed money, but I think this contract's not too bad. He's still a young player, could improve. I think this is a pretty good signing.
I think a lot of these contracts where they're a little inflated with money, you have to pay guys a little bit more to bring them into a rebuild type situation. Yeah. So I think that has a lot to do with it. But Miami is a good place. It's nice and warm and a big city. So I'm sure people don't mind taking the trip to Miami. And then when all the good young players come in from the next draft and the draft after that, it's going to be a lot easier for them to get free agents, and they could totally turn it around.
Mm-hmm. Definitely an up-and-coming team with young guys signing. So those are pretty much all the contracts I'm going to break down. But now I'm just going to give a little overview of what the other guys that they brought in are doing. So Clayton Fedulum was a safety and a special teams guy for the Bengals, and he was a captain of their team for 3 years. And also Camus Greer-Hill was a linebacker / safety for the Eagles, and he was also a captain. And honestly, Brian Flores is just bringing in a lot of guys who can lead a team and can take over. And I really like those 2 signings. They're very cheap deals, very team friendly. I don't remember the numbers exactly, but those are just guys who could come in and lead right off the bat. They also signed Emmanuel Agba, young guy He's been in the league for 4 years, and he kind of like revitalized his career last year with the Chiefs. He didn't play outstanding or anything. Like he's not the next like Von Miller or anything, but he definitely can improve and be a guy that the Dolphins use moving forward. Also, Ted Karras on the offensive line, former New England Patriots center, and Eldon Roberts was a linebacker / safety from the Patriots that are two Brian Flores guys. So I like all our signings from this free agency.
Yeah, I like the emphasis that they put on special team guys. I like when coaches decide to give real money to those people because like they play a very important role. Special teams is a huge part of football in general, even though the kickoffs are getting shorter and they're trying to like limit that. I think special teams are important. I like when teams pay kickers. That's just why I was pissed when the Jets let Jason Myers go. But oh well, I mean, I don't know. I like these moves, especially since they were captains, good leaders on special teams. I think
I
that'll
would say
be huge for them next year.
the leadership element's underrated, right? Especially when you know you're gonna have a bunch of young guys coming the next few years. You need to teach them how to be an NFL player, right? These guys only play college football. They need to learn the business side of things and how to act as a professional. And I think having guys who are clear leaders among the younger guys can really help them grow as players.
Yeah, especially as special teams leaders, because a lot of the later round rookies are going to be in special teams when they start at the very least. So they're going to get a lot of interaction with these good leader guys on the special teams. And I think that'll be
No
helpful
doubt.
for development just all through.
And the last two things I'm going to say about the Dolphins is they still have the second most remaining cap behind the Browns. And they might want to try and use this cap and their draft picks to maybe try and trade for somebody like Yannick Ngakoue, or maybe just try and sign somebody else who's left, or maybe save their money for next year when more free agents pop out. And the last thing I'm going to say is the average age of the Miami Dolphins is the youngest in the league at an average of 24.2 years old, which just shows how young this team is going and where they can go to in the future.
It's just that might be dangerous for them in the long run. If everyone's too young, they might not be Super Bowl bound. I mean, the 49ers proved that wrong last year, so maybe I'll mark my words, but not necessarily with a lack of experience will it come.
We're not a team that's looking to go to the Super Bowl this year. We're definitely a team that's up and coming. So I'm
Yeah, of course.
age if our target for the Super Bowl is in like 3 years or so, 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, the Niners have a guy like Richard Sherman, too, on defense, who you have a great veteran leader there, Joe Staley, a good veteran on the offense. So they have enough older guys to mentor everyone. It was a young team overall, but it was a good balance.
In the Dolphins' case, if they think like they're ready to make a run, I think they're going to bring in some good veterans, like through maybe a trade or in the offseason, like right before they're ready to compete. And we know that they're not ready to compete next year, but they might be in the next 2 or 3 years.
I agree.
So yeah, that pretty much wraps up our draft analysis, our free agency analysis of our favorite teams and some teams who don't have first round picks. Next episode will come out next Tuesday. We'll be talking about the draft, which is upcoming. We're going to do a mock draft collectively. ProFootballFocus.com has a mock draft that we can do that we're going to set up. And, we're going to be streaming that.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, exciting times coming for next episode. I was thinking what we could do is maybe we could have what we think is going to happen, and then we'll take what we would have done if we were the GM in that situation. So we'd have like 2 different drafts all the way through. So if that's a cool idea, if anyone agrees with that, feel free to comment. Like we don't have anything right now. We're doing this for ourselves, but if anyone has any ideas, feel free.
So yeah, next episode Tuesday we'll be doing a mock draft. Draft's in 10 days, so we'll have 2 more episodes before that, and after the draft we'll definitely be breaking down picks and seeing what teams could have done differently.
So ready for the draft. Let's go.
Can't wait. All right, so that wraps
All right,
up.
we'll see you guys next week then.
Yep, we'll see you on Tuesday.
Bye.